the second attempt of the Maharashtra-MBA CET, something that is happening for the very first time. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope all of you are also looking forward to it. So if you have any questions regarding the Maharashtra-MBA CET, the second attempt, feel free to ask me. I'll be very happy if I can take your questions. Now, just a couple of things, right, before we get into the questions and answers. So I thought I'll share a little bit about what happened in the first attempt and what are the learnings from that first attempt for the second attempt that students can implement. So first things first, the paper this year across the slots, if you look at all 5 slots that happened for the first attempt, which happened from 6th, 7th and 8th April, the question paper was on the easier side. So most of the students found the question paper to be slightly easier compared to what typically CET has been. So all across the papers, it was observed that a lot of students were able to attempt more number of questions compared to the mocks that they typically, where they attempt the number of questions that they attempt, right? So mostly that is going to continue for the second attempt as well. So I don't think you need to change any strategy too much. Whatever strategy you had for your first attempt, you more or less have the same strategy. But again, figure out where you've gone wrong, right? So in case you're not able to attempt as per your potential, you should revisit and figure out if there is any change that you need to make to the strategy that you have. Okay. So now when you look at the overall composition, there was no change whatsoever. So you had 25 questions of abstract reasoning. One thing that we found was in abstract reasoning, you had a lot of questions related to counting of either squares or triangles or rhombus and so on. So one thing that I would definitely practice over the next 2 weeks is going to be counting based questions. So ensuring that I'm covering all the possible figures that are out there, whether it is squares or triangles or rectangles or let's say rhombus and so on and so forth. Even circles for that matter, right? So you should try and practice a lot of these counting based questions, especially for abstract reasoning. For the other question types, whether it is series, odd one out and so on, they were pretty straightforward. So nothing too challenging there. There's one particular question type which appeared in CET 25 but didn't appear in CET 26 was the 9-figure question. So there was a particular question type that appeared in 25. In case you have solved those papers, you know it. In case you haven't, they are there in my IMS dashboard for all of you, so you can solve it from there. So 3 by 3 figure is given, and then there are 9 figures that are there inside, and you have to find which is the one that will appear at the place of question mark and all of that, right? So those particular question, that particular question type was not there, and that's a good news because that type was a little bit irritating. So abstract reasoning overall extremely straightforward apart from the counting based questions. How much time you should be spending on AR is anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes, not more than that. In fact, it may be possible for some students to finish 25 questions in between 15 to 20 minutes, and that's a very good attempt if you're doing that. So 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes max is what you can spend on abstract reasoning. Now let's talk about the next section, which is the language section. So in the language section, out of 50 questions, you had 20 RC questions. Now 4 RCs of 5 questions each, and RCs definitely should be attempted. They weren't very long, so I would say practice RCs over the next 2 weeks. Don't skip RCs because it's a very scoring area. In case you miss out on one of the RCs, I can still understand it, but at least you should attempt 3 RCs out of 4. They were not very easy to read, but at the same time not too difficult to read as well. So the length was about 4 paragraphs to 5 paragraphs, not very heavy to read as such. So it was possible to read the questions first and then read the RC. So a lot of students, what they do is they read RC first and then they do question. But in CET, you can change the approach a little bit. You can read the question, go to RC and try and find where it is. However, it's completely okay if you do RC first and then go to questions. Reading the questions first would be a good strategy. So read all 4 or 5 questions that are based on it, then go and read the RC and then come back to the question. So that might help you to get the answers faster. The verbal ability section didn't have any surprises as such. So again, no change in strategy. Whatever you have done so far, just continue to do that. A lot of questions related to grammar, related to synonyms, antonyms, and so on. But again, they were pretty straightforward to handle. Don't spend too much time on these in case you don't know a particular word. It's not that suddenly you'll have a eureka moment to get that meaning or whatever. It's just better to then mark something and move on. Overall, I would say for 20 RC questions, about maximum of 20 minutes with 1 minute per question. And for the rest of the 30 VA questions, about 20 minutes. So from a time distribution perspective, I think 40 minutes is pretty good. Don't keep anything more than that for the VRC section. So 40 minutes of VRC and around 20 to 25 max minutes of abstract tracing. That should be the strategy that we discussed. Now let's move on to the next area, which is the quant section. Now in quant, arithmetic was the dominant part. So you need to do your arithmetic really, really well. Questions weren't difficult. They were easily manageable, but you need to know the formula. There were, of course, questions, 1 to 2 questions, or sometimes 3 questions from the other areas like geometry, whether it is permutation, combination, and so on. But I would say arithmetic is the core. So if you do arithmetic, you are sorted. There were DI sets as well, but DI sets weren't time consuming. You can technically solve all the DI sets that you get. So focus on arithmetic. It will also take care of your data interpretation. In case you're somebody who, for your first attempt, didn't prepare very well for DI, for this attempt, you should definitely practice a lot of DI. Some particular types that I would suggest is going to be questions related to pie charts, questions related to tables, and bar graph and line graph. So bar graph, line graph, pie charts, and tables. These 4 you should definitely do. Typically, they would have applications of averages, percentages, profit loss discount, and either ratios or sometimes mixtures, right? So just doing all of this, which is essentially arithmetic, should be good enough. You may also have, again, there will be direct questions on things like profit loss discount, SICI, time, speed, distance, time and work. Quite a few questions of time, speed, distance, in fact. So doing arithmetic will ensure that you are in a good position to handle the paper. So in case you haven't done arithmetic, please do it. You still have about 14-15 days ahead of you, and it is definitely possible to cover the core concepts of all the arithmetic topics in this particular time frame. So please do that. Regarding DI, I would say read the questions to figure out what exactly you need to calculate, because there were certain questions where you may have a temptation that let me solve all the entire set first and then go to questions. But you need not calculate everything. The way it happened in some of the questions that I had in my paper as well, that you have to read the question to see exactly what are they asking. I mean, you may have, let's say, boys and girls in a particular school. Now, do you really need to calculate the exact number of boys and girls every single time, or calculate, let's say, for 5 schools and then go to questions? No, because they may be asking only for, say, school A, B, and D. In that case, just read the question carefully and then start solving, rather than solving the set first and then going to questions. So that's for the QADI. Now QADI is going to be time consuming. So I would say a maximum of 50 minutes is what you can spend. Try and cap it at around 45. That would be great if you can do that. Plus, it's not that you should be solving the entire section for 45 minutes. What you can do is you can set an initial round, which is going to be, let's say, 30 minutes of attempt, wherein you exhaust all the easy questions. So let's say I start with quant. The first 30 minutes, I'm going to exhaust all easy questions from the quant section. And then I will say, okay, fine, now I have these remaining questions. Am I going to do it because I know them? Or am I not going to do them today because I don't know them? So I will take that decision. And then in the remaining time, I can either randomly mark or I can start solving them. So 30 minutes of first round and then maybe 15 minutes of round 2 is what you can do for the QADI section. And then comes the biggest change where there was some difference compared to the previous versions of CET, was the logical reasoning section. So in the LR section, there were no typical caselets that you get, wherein you have one long caselet. For example, 8 friends going to 8 different cities, traveling via 8 routes and so on, with 5 questions based on it. Now, because that particular question type wasn't there, a lot of students found the paper to be easy because you can navigate through more questions, because you're not spending a lot of time on 5 questions. So because everything was individual questions, it was possible to attempt more compared to what happens in a caselet situation. So in a typical paper, you would have, say, 5-6 caselets with about 25-30 questions. And then it becomes very difficult to have so many solve so many caselets in the first place. So not having caselets was a big advantage for students this time. I hope that will continue for attempt 2 as well. So be ready mentally to do more and more questions in the LR section. Now, whether it is clocks, whether it is calendar, whether it is questions related to logical puzzles, standalone logical puzzles, you had pretty much everything that got covered. A couple of questions of quant appeared in the logic section, so don't be surprised if you see that, but that number won't be very high. And one very important thing is the input output question type, because some of it was a little difficult to crack. So in case you find anything, whether it is a standalone logic puzzle like a series or a coding decoding puzzle, or let's say an input output, if it gets irritating, if you think this is taking too much time, you may have to randomly mark something and move on. Another particular question type which appeared a lot in the LR section is the coding decoding plus blood relation question type. And I would say that you read question carefully and practice these questions specifically for the second attempt, wherein you have codes given. So for example, A plus B means A is the brother of B. A dollar C means A is the sister of C, and so on. And then the question says which of the following means, let's say B is the maternal uncle of K. And then you have options in the form of codes. So this is a time consuming question type. I don't think anybody should be doing this in round 1. So if you see a question like this, move on to the next question. Finish off all the easy questions the way you do, let's say, in the quant section as well, and then come back to these slightly time consuming question types. So anything that is going to take more than say 45 seconds or a minute, you don't do it in round 1, you come back to it in round 2, and that strategy works well for everybody. So please follow that. Regarding section order, how to attempt, I would say it's completely up to you. But generally avoid starting with LR because it can have a little bit of surprises plus slightly time consuming questions. Start with any of the other three, right? So you can start with, let's say, quant, you can start with verbal, you can start with AR, depending on what your how you're comfortable with individual areas. But again, if you want to start with LR, please go ahead and do it, right? So just because I am saying it doesn't mean that you have to follow it. But my suggestion is that don't start with LR because sometimes it may get time consuming, and it's easy to kind of get sucked into that whole thing where you keep solving questions and without realizing that you have spent so much time. So please don't do that. That might be a bit of a problem for you. The other important thing is to keep a time check every say 30-40 minutes. Keep looking at the timer again, not like every 1 minute you look at the timer, but after you've solved, let's say, considerable number of questions, maybe after 15-20 questions that you've solved, just look at the timer and see if you're progressing in the right way. So what I did specifically was, as I started with the AR section, after I was done, I just noted down how much time I had spent on the AR. Then I moved to quant. After solving quant, I just again noted down how much time I had put in on the quant section. That allowed me to kind of plan the rest of the attempt properly. So just keeping a track of time is crucial. Please do that. And again, how you do it is up to you. So you need to practice that in your mocks over the next 2 weeks. All the mocks that you take, ideally you should try and practice this, right? From a score perspective, whatever you get in your mocks, you will generally end up getting better than that in the final test, considering the difficulty level that we have seen. In fact, in most of the papers, I think the topper should be somewhere in the range of 160 or 165 plus to about 170, 175 as well. So 160 to 175, those are the ranges where the toppers would lie. Typically, that does not happen in CET, but wherever in the past it has happened, we have seen that everybody has scored on the higher side, right? Because the paper is easy. Typically, what we used to say earlier is that if it is a moderate paper or let's say an easy paper, your cutoff for JBMS would be somewhere around say 150. If it is a moderate paper, about 140. And if it is a difficult paper, then it's going to be about 130 or so, right? Let's say a very difficult paper. But then those very difficult papers have stopped appearing now. So it's generally 150, 145, maybe that kind of a range. So if you're thinking of JBMS, right, especially in a paper like this, you have to target 160 plus. Because that's the only way to get to even 155 plus or 150 plus as a score. So aim for 160 plus, attempt accordingly. So if you know my accuracy is going to be say 80%, you'll have to attempt pretty much about 180, 185 questions genuinely to be in a position where you score above 160, right? So that is why your attempt has to be on the higher side. You can't attempt less and then say, okay, I'm going to get into JBIMS with that. So nobody will generally have like 100% accuracy. So like a very good accuracy would be about 90%. But even I haven't seen that happening a lot. I think typically about 85% is what you can work with. So yeah, I think that would be like the overall strategy part of it. How you manage yourself during the test, you'll have to practice that in the mocks. So which section you begin with, if you want, let's say the order that you follow, don't change it too much. So if you have followed a particular order and that has worked for you, just continue to do that. But if you think no, this needs to be changed, then try out different things. Otherwise, in the next 2 weeks, don't try and change things too much. One very important thing about CET is that the paper gets tiring. So it's exhausting, it's mentally taxing to just sit at one place for 2.5 hours and just attack questions one after the other. So the mental and the physical stamina that you will need to crack the CET is something that you need to focus on over the next 2 weeks. So I'll take a lot of tests, definitely, a lot of full length tests, but I'll also do short drills, right? So it could be doing say section test or topic test. Even when you think that okay, no particular topic, I would say in that case you can sit with questions and try and do them orally. So a lot of people keep asking, right, what is the way to get faster in CET? The only way to get faster in CET is to do as many questions as you can orally. Because if you start putting down your pen for every question that you see, you will not be able to attempt everything. So what you need to do is as many questions as possible. Try and do them orally. And for example, a lot of vocab questions, right? You don't need to do any rough work for that. And in quant as well, you'll have a lot of questions where you can just spot the logic and figure out an answer. Same with some of the logical puzzles that you may see. So as many questions as possible, if you can reduce the rough work or use, don't use pen paper, right? That is the way to get faster. How many rough sheets typically would you need? I would say about 4 to 5 rough sheets. CET Cell this year gave their individual rough sheets. You get a single rough sheet with a CET Cell branding on it. 5 rough sheets should be good enough for most of the students. In the beginning, if you want more, you can always ask for it. So in my center, for example, they were giving one, but I asked them, and so did a lot of other students. You ask for say two in the beginning itself, because every time you want to ask for a rough sheet, there is a little bit of time that you end up spending in it. So account for all of those things. Ask for two rough sheets in the beginning itself, and then in the middle you might need a couple of them, right? So maybe five total, six. I don't think anybody will need more than that. uh, Pen you will have to carry on of your own. So they have clearly mentioned that you have to carry your own pen. So please do that. You can carry your favorite pen, something that you like working with, and don't rely on them, right? So they can always give you pens, but then please don't rely on them. It clearly mentions that you have to carry your own pen. You have to carry your photograph. You have to paste it on the admit card and all of that. So print the admit card. The centers are obviously not out for the second attempt, but once it is out, get the print. Make sure that you take as many mocks as possible in that same slot, at least one, so that your body gets used to it. And because let's say if it is a morning slot, say 9 to 11:30 kind of thing, then your body has to be conditioned to be at 100% during those 2.5 hours. And that practice you will have to do. Otherwise, you might end up feeling sleepy, or you might not be at your 100%, correct? So do that in the last 2 weeks. So overall, I would say for anybody who has taken the first attempt, you now know what has happened in CET. You just need to fix your mistakes, modify the strategy a little bit if it hasn't worked for you, and then do more questions, especially the types that appeared on the CET, to get faster at it. Right. So overall, that's going to be my take on the whole thing. If anybody has any questions, you let me know. Otherwise, we are more or less done. We don't have too many things to cover. It's limited time for sure, 2 weeks. But then, if you think of it, in 2 weeks, you can definitely improve. Right. So that improvement could be 5 marks, 10 marks, 15 marks, and so on. Because I know a lot of students who the first attempt, right, they didn't even prepare as much. So they just decided to go for it just to see how it was, and they had second attempt as their main attempt. So if that is the case for you, if the first attempt hasn't gone well for you, or you didn't take it seriously enough, this is the time to work on the question types and the strategy of the test so that you're able to perform better. Okay. All right. If there are any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we can wrap up the session here. And if you have any questions at a later point of time, you can always ask me by leaving a comment on this particular video. Okay. Overall, I don't think the attempt 2 is going to be very different from attempt 1. So I'm not expecting any surprises as such, because it's the same agency conducting the test, right? So between those, among those 5 attempts at 5 papers that happened, 5 slots, the fluctuations weren't too many, right? So that's a very good thing that happened this year, that there were very few mistakes, and there were no major fluctuations. So I would say it was conducted much better compared to what we have seen in the past. I hope that happens for the second attempt as well. I had paid 3K fees now, so I don't have to register again for attempt 2. No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to register again for the second attempt if you had already registered in the beginning. How frequently do you? Okay, how frequently do you write mocks? So now you have what, 2 weeks, right? So I think you should take about 5 to 6 mocks, which means that you can take one every alternate day, and that's good enough. You don't need to do more than that. See, what also happens with CET is that it's a very tiring paper, and that's why taking too many mocks, especially in the run-up, is not a good idea. Since you've already attempted the first this thing, and now you know what has happened, it's just a matter of fine-tuning the strategy and being in a good shape rather than overexerting yourself in the last 2 weeks. So I would not encourage people to take, say, more than 7, 8 mocks. That's the maximum that I would suggest, by like doing one every alternate day and analyzing the paper thoroughly to see where the gaps are. Okay, Suresh, I hope that answers your question. All right. Okay. I think we can wrap up the session here. I don't see too many questions or whatever. So I think we can wrap it up here. And thank you so much for joining. Wish all of you all the best. This was like a small attempt at giving you everything in a very concise manner as to what you can do over the next 2 weeks. I hope the session has helped you. Wish all of you all the best. And we'll, of course, have the live analysis and things that we'll be doing on the day of the test. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Bye, everyone. Take care.